I never edit my images. It's something that I will never say, but there is a subsection of photographers that do say that. Today, I'm going to explain why editing your photographs does not make your photography impure. So for the record, I don't object to people not editing their images. What you do with your photography is absolutely your own decision. And if you want to just take a camera, go out and shoot and use what you've got straight out of the camera, that's absolutely fine with me. But don't try to infer that that's the purest type of photography, because it absolutely isn't. Editing is an integral part of the photographic process. It's your creative vision. From the moment you take your image, you have an idea in your mind of how you want that image to come out. And the chances are, what you get in camera is not going to be anywhere near close to that vision. So editing is really a good thing, and it is not being impure. Now, of course, that doesn't negate the fact that you've got to get it right in camera. You've got to get your exposure perfect. You've got to get your color balance on point. You've got to get your focus in exactly the right place. You don't want camera shake and you don't want extraneous parts to the image. You want it perfect in camera. But if you're shooting straight out of camera and then putting on the screen, that is not the purest form of photography. That is the photography that Nikon or Sony or Canon are defining for you. A JPEG straight out of the camera is not your creative vision. It has contrast applied to it. It has white balance applied to it. It has sharpening applied to it. It has all sorts of details applied to it that you haven't made the decision on. Now, if you shoot raw, you're taking that image back into an editing suite and you're defining how you want that image. To me, that is a much purer form of photography than straight out of the camera as defined by your camera manufacturer. Now, I get that you want to get it right in camera and be as pure as you can, but don't preach to other people that this is the purest form of photography, because it's not. Some of the world's greatest photographers, Ansel Adams for example, would never just show you the negative. That's not how it works. Every time he printed, he worked with his printer that he'd worked for many decades to create his vision of the image that he saw when he pressed that shutter. And that wasn't the image that he took. And beyond that, a lot of film shooters say, oh, it's the purest form of photography, but it's not. You're at the mercy of the developing, the different chemicals, the amount of time you process it for. You're at the mercy of how long you print it for and what paper contrast you're using and what masking you're using. It's not the purest form of photography, it's an analog form of editing. Today I'm down at Durham Cathedral, as you probably know is one of my favourite spots to shoot, and I've been shooting some images just before the sun has come up with the lights on the cathedral. They've been shot in RAW, I've bracketed them, and the plan is I'm going to go back to the studio later on and I'm going to show you how the editing process really changes the look of the image. Now, the sun wasn't quite up when I got here this morning, but it was still reasonably dark, so my vision is to have a darker looking image. If you can see the old mill over there, when I arrived here there was a light on in that mill. Whether I can get that to punch out or not, I don't know. But my vision is to try and get that to punch out, to darken things down, to have the lights on the cathedral showing up, and to get a really, really good image. And it won't look anything like the image that I've taken in camera here. Now, I've shot RAW and JPEG together. We'll compare the JPEG image with it later on when we're back in the studio, and we'll see just how different my final vision is to the JPEG image. If you see my recent videos, you will know that I'm experimenting with the DXO products. So today we'll be taking these images back and we'll be processing them in DXO PhotoLab, and we will see what we can get out of that. Now, if you haven't seen my previous videos, I am collaborating with DXO. I haven't been paid for this video. I am merely going on a journey using their software whilst also continuing to work with Adobe Lightroom. So there's no money changed hands, it's purely my opinion of this software. They have given me an affiliate code. If you want to get 15% off, you'll find that in the description below using my code. I will get a small commission from any sales on that. So, it's a beautiful morning. I'm going to go and get a cup of coffee and I'm going to head back to the studio. So welcome back to the studio. I've uploaded the images and I've got them into DXO PhotoLab right now. As I mentioned on the banks of the Wear in Durham, the mood I'm looking for when I'm editing this picture is to give it a sort of dark, almost wintry feel, punching out the lights on the cathedral and in that mill across the water, the old fulling mill. Now that's actually not as easy as it sounds, and that's one of the reasons that I shot the bracket. I'm actually going to use one of the more underexposed images. As you'll see, the contrast in these images is really high, from the quite bright sky to the very dark shadows in the path area around where I'm shooting from. So that's the idea. I've picked out an image that I want to work on, and let's get into it. So these are the images in the photo library section of DXO PhotoLab. And as you can see, I've color coded two different images. It's this particular image that I've decided to work on. And as you can see, the one in the green is the RAW file and the one in the red is the JPEG file. I should just add that I quite like the DXO color coding system as opposed to Lightroom's. Lightroom will color the entire slide the color that you selected, whereas in DXO they just put this color tag down the bottom here. And I think when you select the image, it actually makes it more obvious what the color is. When you select it in Lightroom, you get this sort of lightening of the image, but it also lightens the saturation of the color so that it's not always immediately apparent which color coding you're using on that image. Anyway, that's by the by. Let's open this image up, and as you can see, it's quite dark. As I suggested, I've gone for the darker image. If we just compare it to the JPEG, you'll see an interesting aspect of DXO here. You can see that as I go to the JPEG version, the lens corrections have been taken away. If I go back, you'll see that lens corrections have been applied, the distortion has been taken out, particularly from the center. If you actually look where the fulling mill is there, you can see there's quite a difference there. So let's get into this, and the first thing I'm actually going to do is just crop the image to the vision that I want it. We've got a little bit of excess over here, so I'm going to crop in a little bit on this side. Let's unlock it so we've got an unconstrained crop. We'll come up a little bit, come down a little bit here, and we'll crop a little bit extra of this sky out. We've got the cathedral nicely on the upper right third there, we've got the fulling mill on the right third there, and then we've got this lovely pathway here. Now I want to try and lighten up this area, this pathway area, and also punch these leaves out a little bit, these golden leaves, all the whilst giving it a sort of a bluer, colder, more wintry look to it. So let's accept that as our crop. And the first thing we're going to do is in the Basics tab over here on the right, we're just going to do the basic corrections. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull those highlights down. If I actually put the highlight clipping on and the shadow clipping on, and I'll bring those highlights back up, you'll see that there is some blown highlights in the sky there, but they will come back in as I slide that highlight slider down. I'm going to take those off because I'm not too worried about the shadow areas, just the highlights. We are going to bring the shadow areas up a little bit, just like that, but it's not the image that I'm personally looking for. Now I want to bring the sky down a little bit more, so we're going to go over to the first tab here, which is the exposure tab. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tone picker and we're going to pick the sky roughly in the middle there, and as you can see, that's put a dot pretty much on that peak of the histogram there. That peak there is representing pretty much most of the sky. Now if I tried to select the sky and bring it down in a mask, it's really complicated here. You'll see that there's lots of gaps in the trees through the leaves, and it would really struggle to mask those out. So we're just going to be sort of subtly bringing that sky down using this curve here, and as you can see, it's bringing a little bit of the cathedral down, but not too much. And we can counter that by bringing up the shadow areas again, a little like that. And that's already better. I want to bring the blacks down now, just to bring in some mood to it. So we're going to bring the blacks all the way down and just boost those shadows a touch more like that. So that's pretty much the look I'm going for. As you can see, the lights in the mill here have started to punch out a little bit, and the lights on the cathedral have also punched out a little bit. So I'm happy with that, and we'll close that out.
And now we're going to go to the color tab and try and create the look that I'm looking for, that sort of colder wintry feel. And the first thing we're going to simply do is just bring the color temperature down. Now we're not going to whack it all the way down because that looks just awful, but we're going to just bring it down slightly below where we shot it at, and probably around there. We've still got a little bit of color in it and it still looks pretty good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to try and enhance the blueness in the greens of the trees here. So we've selected the greens using the HSL tool here, and you can select all the way from just the greens all the way around to the greens and the blues and the whole spectrum. But we're going to restrict it to a certain area. We're going to not go into the yellows because we don't want to affect the yellows. So we're just going to try the greens here, and we're going to bring down the saturation very slightly. If I do it completely, you can see there's quite a difference, but if I just do it gently, we'll bring the luminance up very slightly. But now what we're going to do is we're going to try and enhance the yellows a little bit, and we're going to do that by picking a yellow from the tree here. And as you can see, it's a much more refined area that's popped up in the HSL mixer here. And we're going to increase the saturation of those yellows a little bit. As you can see, that comes out really quite nicely there. And we'll just bring the luminance of them up a touch as well. And that looks really good. And now we're going to do the same with the lights on the cathedral here, and that should have a bit of an effect on the lights in the fulling mill here as well. So if we click on that area, and again you've got a very specific part to this HSL mixer circle here, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring the luminance up a little bit on that. We're going to bring the saturation up a little bit more. We've definitely got a little bit more punch in the cathedral there. So now we're going to go over and start using some of the selection tools, and we've got them up here. So what we'll do is we'll select the cathedral here, and then we will try and add to this mask by selecting this part of the cathedral as well. And then we'll add also the old fulling mill here. And each time if you want to add to the AI mask, you just use the new sub mask tool here. It's not perfect, we'll just select in the roof as well. And what I want to do is just add a little bit of warmth to the cathedral. Not too much, it needs to be very, very subtle. And I want to bring the shadows down just so we can punch those lights out a little bit more, just like that. If you do the blacks, it will probably make it too dark, but by doing the shadow areas, just bringing it down very, very slightly, and you can also bring the highlight areas up on that mask, you will see that the cathedral is punching out more. We can also use a little bit of micro contrast to enhance that look, just like that. And that looks good. Now, again, we're going to use the HSL mixer, and we're going to pick the yellows. And there's a very specific band of yellow there. And we're going to increase the saturation on those yellows. And if we just bring that round a little bit more to the oranges, we've increased the saturation and increased the luminance. You can see now that the light is punching out really nicely in the fulling mill, but I want to add a little bit more to that. So what I'm going to do, just use the AI tool with a new AI mask, just to select that area there. And then we're just going to increase the temperature a little bit. And what we're going to do is actually lower the micro contrast, so it's got a little bit of a bloom to it. And that will punch it out really, really nicely. And we'll close that out. You have to remember to close out when you do these edits, otherwise they don't apply and you start actually re-editing things that you don't intend to edit. So close out after each edit. And then if we come back to the full view, that's looking really nice. Now I just want to enhance these leaves here a little bit more as well, just brighten them up. So we'll stay in masking tools, and we'll just use a brush to brush in a little bit of this pathway here, just to lighten this area up here and this area around here to bring out the leaves and stuff. We'll mask that off. Now we're going to be very subtle with this. We're going to use the shadows to come up a little bit, very, very subtly like that. We're going to increase the temperatures to punch those leaves out a very little bit again, very, very subtle amount. and we'll add a little bit of micro contrast to it. And that's looking good. So again, we'll close out of that and we'll go back to the basic tab. I'm just going to lower the temperature very slightly more, just like that. And I think that I'm happy with that. That's pretty much the vision that I wanted, a colder, darker looking image where the cathedral was pumping out the light and also where you could see the light coming out of the old fulling mill.
So that's the editing done, and it's done to what my creative vision was for this image whilst I was stood down on the banks of the River Wear at Durham Cathedral a few days ago. I had this idea in my mind, to make it colder, to make it more wintry looking, and to punch the lights out. Now, if we put up the original JPEG, you can see that's a hell of a difference. There's nothing wrong with the JPEG other than it's a bit underexposed, but it's not the image that I envisaged for this shot. And nor could it ever be, because JPEG doesn't give me the control that I need. I can't easily control the white balance. If I go in and do selective editing in different areas, it can very easily break up the image because you're working off a destructible file type. If I'm using RAW, I have so much more control over all the elements of the image. Now, I'm sure that there's going to be some of you watching this that say, well, I prefer the JPEG. But the simple fact is, that's just your opinion. That's not your creative vision for my image. Only I have that. You are deciding that you don't like my version of the image, and that's absolutely fine. However, that JPEG is not my creative vision. It's the creative vision of Sony, who applied the sharpening to it, who applied the contrast and white balance to it. It's not malleable enough for me to edit into what I want. So editing is important. Editing is a part of the photographic process. And by not editing, you're not being purer in your photography. You're simply denying your creative vision beyond taking the image. And to me, that's a big loss. So don't forget, I do have a discount on DXO products. You'll find a link in the description below. And if you use the code JasonRove15, you'll get 15% off. If you've enjoyed the video, a like would be fantastic. A subscription would be even better. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next one.